to the heart and take me on a journey.
Hey, National Park Church here for another week of our Bible class time together. We're going to do something different this week. I think the material that we're going to be discussing is in connection with what we talked about last week. If you were able to watch the class, we discussed 6 ways to disagree well. And a couple of themes that came out of that is, one, I need to love the person that I'm in dialogue with, and I need to make sure that I understand where they're coming from, that my goal is not to falsely kind of impose on them particular viewpoints or particular ways of thinking, or even kind of make false judgments about their motivation for why they hold a particular position or kind of the place that they're coming from. And I wanted to continue that. It's not just in our engagement with Scripture, but in general, the ways in which falsely categorizing people allows us to treat them in a way that we should not treat them. And I came across a podcast episode by a minister in Atlanta named Don McLaughlin, and I think he excellently lays out this way in which we can characterize people in very unhelpful ways, and actually that's a move that Satan wants us to make. That the way Satan divides us most significantly is by having us categorize people in ways other than seeing them as human beings made in the image of God. I hope you'll participate in this video with me, and I think Don has a ton of things to teach us.
Chapter 8, this is the story of this woman who is caught in the act of adultery. Now, I'm going to actually read John chapter 8. I'm going to begin in verse 2. I'm going to close out in verse 11, but I'm actually going to leave out a verse the first time I read it, and you see if you notice it. Ready? At dawn, Jesus appeared again in the temple courts. All the people were gathered around him, so he sat down and he began to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in the act of adultery. They made her stand before the group, and then they said to Jesus, "Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and he said to them, "Well, if any of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and he wrote on the ground. Well, at this, those who heard began to, walk away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and he asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one," she said. "Neither do I condemn you," Jesus said. "Go now and leave your life of sin." That's one of the most hope-filled stories in all of Scripture. We can see ourselves in this story in a myriad of ways. Sometimes we've been the accusers with the stones. Sometimes we've been the woman caught in some sin. We can see ourselves in the story, right? But did you notice the verse I left out? Did you notice I didn't read verse 6? Yes, because see, the story can be read without verse 6. So let's go back to verse 6, because it's in verse 6 that we get a clue as to what's happening. They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. Now, I want you to notice that. Did you notice we read the story, and you can read it without that verse, but the writer of John says, whoa, let me give you a little insight what's happening here. Just like the story in Matthew 12, they don't care about this lady. They have no concern about the lady. They don't care if it turns out well for her or if she dies. They could care less. What they care about is somehow making Jesus look bad. And the Bible says they just used the woman and their question as a way to get at Jesus, as a trap, to have a basis for accusing him. Now, you may have noticed, and you might be ahead of me already, you may have noticed that the word accuse is used in both stories. That they wanted to accuse him in Matthew 12. They wanted to accuse him in John 8. I want to tell you how this story has changed my life and my understanding of unity. I was actually studying for a sermon, John chapter 8. I was on an airplane flying home from Detroit, Michigan to Atlanta. On the airplane, I had my study materials laid out on my little tray, and I was translating John 8 from Greek to English. I was doing that so I could hopefully better understand what I was reading. I got to verse 6, and I was just studying along, and I was going word by word, and I was writing the words out from Greek into English, and I came across the word for accuse. And the word for accuse is fascinating. It's a word from a root in Greek that would be pronounced kategoreo, a noun form kategoros, or another noun form, categoria. And something immediately triggered in my mind. Categoreo, categoros, categoria. Category? Category? Is this where category comes from? Well, at that time, planes did not have Wi-Fi. I didn't have a way to look that up. So when I got on, we landed, I got out of my car and I got on the phone with one of my fellow ministers at our church. And I said, I need your help. He said, where are you? I said, I just left the airport. I'm on my way to the office. He said, what do you need? I said, I need you to look up a word in English. I need you to look up the etymology, the historical development of the word category. He said, it can't wait till you get to the office. I said, oh, come on, man, please help me, please help me. He's like, all right. So he begins to look it up, and I can hear the pages fluttering around. And he said, category. Okay, it comes from a Latin term, and it turns out it comes from the Greek category. I was like, I knew it. Our English word category traces its roots to the same word used in Matthew 12 and John 8. It traces its roots to the word for accuse. You see, the way they used the word was that if they could lock Jesus in to a particular categorization, a categorizing of him, that could lead to dehumanizing him. You see, it's that exact same word that is in the story of his arrest and his trial that led to his crucifixion. You see, if we pick up the story in Matthew chapter 27, Jesus is before the governor, and he was being accused by the chief priests and the elders. That's our word for category. Mark chapter 15, verse 3, the chief priests accused him of many things. So Pilate the governor asked him, aren't you going to answer them of the many things you are being accused of? The same thing in Luke chapter 23. They keep accusing him. In John chapter 18, they keep accusing him. And in fact, Pilate came out and said, what are the charges you're bringing against this man? John 18 and verse 29. And they say, watch this, ready? If he wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him. What's the category? Criminal. Now we can treat him any way you want. Watch this. Pilate said, well, then take him and judge him by your own law. And they said, we have no right to execute anyone. Now, I want you to watch the chain of complicity. if we can categorize Jesus as a criminal, then we can kill him with impunity. I want you to think about that. Could categorization kill someone? Yes. Yes. Categorization killed Jesus. Because you see, Jesus was innocent. He had not committed a crime. Jesus had never committed a sin. In fact, Jesus himself says, if someone's got something on me, bring it forward. But they already knew they didn't. What were they going to say? Here we go. Ready? We're going to execute Jesus because he healed a man with a withered hand. Somebody's going to be like, you're killing a guy for that? We're going to execute Jesus because he is really kind to sinful people and he helps us see the error of our ways. And, and when we were going to kill this lady caught in adultery and he made us think about our own sin and we all kind of realized that, we're guilty too. So we walked away, but we want to kill him for that. People are like, what? Well, you see, of course, people aren't going to accept that kind of accountability, that kind of assessment, because then you'd have to admit, well, there's no reason to kill him and we can't justify killing him. So we have to categorize him in such a way that we can get people to start mimicking us. Well, he's a drunkard, Jesus, he hangs out with, tax collectors and sinners. Jesus, he's the kind of guy that, if I remember right, he said something like, hey, he's going to tear the temple down. You see, what happens is when we participate in categorization, it makes us complicit in the destruction of others. This happened to the Apostle Paul in the book of Acts as accusations were brought against him. But I want to take this a step further because you see, this virus that divides, this virus that negatively, derogatorily categorizes people and makes them valueless, that virus comes straight from Satan. Watch this. This is in Revelation chapter 12, where beginning in verse 9, it specifically says that this is about the devil, this is about Satan that's led the whole world astray. But listen, beginning in verse 10. Then I heard a loud voice from heaven say, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah, for the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before our God day and night has been hurled down. That word accuser, used in that form only one time in the New Testament, is a title given to Satan. He's the categor. Satan is the categor. Satan is the father of negative categorization. Satan is the father of the one who teaches people how to see nothing good in others, how to talk about them in such a way, name them in such a way, identify them in such a way that there's nothing good about them. And once you determine that there's nothing good about someone, it's kind of like a garage sale. Some things in the garage sale are a priceless family heirloom, and other things are sold as junk. In the categorization of those things, that's how Satan teaches us to do humans. That some we idolize and hold them in the highest value, and others we throw to the scrap heap of humanity. How does that happen? Well, categorization depends in part on naming someone. And we use these names, these descriptive terms, to exonerate some people while we vilify other people. if we're going to be unified, we've got to understand the power of categoria, the categorization of humans. But you see, we're drawn to calling people names. We're drawn to it. It feels simple. It feels powerful. It seems to separate the world into the people that are good and the people that are bad, the people that are smart, the people that are stupid, the people that know what's good for the country and the people that don't. It seems to make it clear for how to vote and how to care and who to listen to and what blog to listen to and what newscast to watch. It feels like the world is all simple again, and Satan says, yes, keep it going. That's it. The more disunity, the better, because that leads to destructive categorization. And if we could just repeat the Holocaust a few more times, we'll have it. That is how Satan thinks, and he is depending on negative categorization to continue his dirty work. You say, oh, Don, you're overstating the case. I mean, that's ridiculous. You know, we learned the lessons of the Holocaust, did we? So talk to me about Rwanda. Talk to me, explain it. About how categorization in 91 days led to the brutal murders of nearly 1 million people starting Easter weekend, 1994. Well, you know, Don, not all the religious people were bad. What's our problem here? Why are we all nervous about this? We're not blaming. We're learning how to be accountable. We're not blaming. We're learning how to be accountable. We're learning that when we categorize people negatively, we are doing Satan's evil work. Surely we can do better than that. When we think about emerging from COVID-19, don't we want to see this resilience of the human spirit, the love of neighbor, for the movement forward of people caring about one another? Don't we want that to continue? Isn't that something of value from the past that we want to see emerge into the future? And that we don't want to see a presidential election spoil something as beautiful as that. We don't want to see politics around the world and all of the scramble for resources resume to where we find ourselves, as the Apostle Paul says to the Galatian church, biting and devouring one another. So Jesus says, I'm actually not going to participate in this. You can accuse all you want. You can categorize me all you want. But at the end of the day, what you're going to find is that I am for all of you, even the ones who right now see me as worth nothing but death. In the years that followed the Rwandan genocide, there's been a series of photographers and journalists at the invitation of the Rwandan government that have continued to document the progress at the 5-year point, the 10-year point, the 20-year point of a nation that's trying to realize we don't ever want that to happen again. We're not assessing blame, we're taking accountability. One of the most important steps in Germany's emergence from the horrors of the Holocaust was to take accountability for what they had done. You breathe a sigh of relief and you say, boy, I'll tell you what, those people on the other side of the ocean, they really messed up. Man, those Europeans, those people in Africa, boy, they really messed up. Really. So we're not going to take accountability for our history of racism in this nation. We're not going to take accountability for our complicity in slavery and Jim Crow and the systematic destruction of people's right to life, right to live, And the categorizing of people as not being equal. We're not going to own that history of our own. We're not going to name it and call out our own accountability. You see, we're not casting blame, but we're learning that a unity that includes us all requires an accountability that addresses what leads to the disunity. So what I want us to close with today is to think about it this way. On the surface, you've got the Hitlers and the Himmlers. Below the surface, you've got other people that are as complicit as Hitler and Himmler. For us to address our accountability, rather than scapegoating the people that are the easiest to see, the most public figures, let's just step into our own journey and begin to ask ourselves, how do I categorize people negatively? How do I use names and derogatory statements to put some people in the scrap heap? How do I ignore the teachings of Jesus when I fail at the golden rule and I don't treat others as I would have them treat me? You see, Jesus is right about everything. And he's the one that just simply says, a new command I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you.
I think one of the hardest things to do in engaging with the material that's been laid out, and I see it in my own heart and my own life, is the natural tendency to want to look externally, to want to say, well, someone else is doing that, or that doesn't represent me at all, that I never participate in falsely categorizing other people. And I appreciated his fact where he was just talking about how the point is not blame. So what he's not wanting us to do is to get in this who's more wrong and who's more right and who can we blame for the problems that are going on here. But Don has this way of inviting us to look into our own hearts and to say, in what areas am I falsely categorizing other people? And can I just name that for many of us, I think a defense mechanism of not having to actually look and probe into my heart where I may be participating in this kind of categorization is that I look at people that I think are worse than I am, that I think are bigger categorizers, if you want to use that phraseology, than I am. And that justifies the areas of my life where I unhelpfully categorize other human beings. Think about it in this way. If I participate in gossip, I usually can find someone who gossips more than I do, which makes me feel like the gossip that I participate in isn't really that big of a deal, right? Because, well, I don't gossip like they do. You know, you can always point to someone that you assume is a worse sinner, if you want to use that language, than you are. A worse offender than you are. But if the goal is none of this kind of categorization is helpful, that it actually does come from the evil one, as Don said, then I want to rid myself of that. And it doesn't really matter of me looking around at everybody else and saying, well, they do it, or they do it worse than I do, or they're categorizing me. I think the place where Christians want to begin is looking at our own lives and our own hearts and asking the question, have I participated in this in any way? Not so I can just feel guilty and sit in that guilt, but so I can reconcile that, so I can change that, so that I can begin to live in such a way where I see people the way that Jesus saw people. I think this is really, really important because we're hardwired to want to minimize our own participation in things and maximize other people's. But I think if we take Don seriously, it begins first with asking the question, where do I participate in this? It's interesting, we're in a society right now where things that we're taught as kids not to do seem to be practiced by the adults, right? So we say things, and this happens a lot in the political sphere of, well, you should never do that. But then someone's defense of doing whatever that thing they should never do is, well, the Republicans did that, or, well, the Democrats did that, as if somehow another's actions justifies my own kind of action. That we were taught as a kid, right, that wasn't going to work. If I went to my parents and said, well, I hit that kid because they hit me first, my parents aren't going to say, well, that makes sense. I justify that. No, they're going to look at me and they're going to say, but you have a particular responsibility. You are in charge of the way in which you respond to people. Another person's actions doesn't justify your own action. And so, sure, are you going to be able to find people that you don't see eye to eye with? Are you going to be able to find people that you think are worse at categorizing as you? Are you going to find people that you don't see eye to eye with on what the solutions are to not categorizing in a particular way? Absolutely. But my encouragement to you watching this video, my encouragement for myself, is not to begin externally, pointing fingers at everybody else, not going, well, who should have heard that? Or why is Don saying that? Why is he picking on me? But beginning internally asking the question, in what ways am I categorizing people that are not helpful, that do not pervade love in the world, but actually is a form of dehumanizing? I know for me, this is a really challenging message because I am hardwired to want to do that on a regular basis in big and small scenarios. But any point where I make a categorization about a person that allows me to feel like they're less worthy of love, then it's a categorization that's not done by Jesus, but, as Don said, comes from the evil one. So my encouragement this week for you is do some introspection, ask some honest questions about yourself, and see what God might want to teach you. Love you guys. Look forward to seeing you really, really soon.